Good morning everybody and welcome to today's pattern video. It is my Strumpet wallet. I know you guys have all been waiting for it. It is finally here. So it's got a zipper pocket on the back. It's got a zipper pocket on the inside. It's got card slots and then two sections to put your notes and receipts. It's got a magnetic zipper, a magnetic closure in the center. So if you wanted to, you could in fact reverse this curve to go the other way. And it works in both vinyl as well as fabric on the back. So I did both. This video is only the one in vinyl, so I can show you how to overcome bulk and things. But yes, it does work in both. So stay tuned to see how it's made. All right, so I'm going to show you how I do the card slots. So I've actually made a card slot accordion. This is one manila folder, and now I know it looks really, really large, but it's because I have joined it with masking tape. Now I had to do two of these joins, so what I did was I laid the masking tape down, and then I put the two sides right up against each other and then taped the whole way around. So I've put all of the measurements for the card slots, so now it will just fold up into the accordion shape that I need. Now I've left this a little bit longer, but you could make this from there to there the exact finished size if you wanted to. So I've just got a strip of my waterproof canvas. So the first thing I'm going to do is pick an edge because I've cut them both with a rotary cutter. So they are both perfectly even. So I'm just going to put two clips on the top so that this edge is right up against there. And then, the easiest way for me is to turn it over, and I'm going to crease to there, like that, and then bend this down and over. Now, you can just mark everything, but I do plan on making a lot of my own wallet. So this is actually quicker. I know it doesn't necessarily look like it. So I'm going to get to here. Bring it up, put a crease, make sure this is lined up along that edge, and then bend it down. Now, if you're worried about it moving, you can grab your iron and just iron this section, like this. So my iron is set to the hottest, which is probably a little bit too hot. You don't want to quite do it as hot as possible. And then we're going to fold this up again, and then down again, and then up again, and then down again, and then up again. Now, as you can see, I've got it upside down because I find that way easier. And you just want to make sure everything's lined up, and then press it with the iron. And that should now crease it, so you can take your clips off, and this should just slide off sideways, like that. And then you can flip it over so that you can crease the back a little better. You just want to make sure they're all lined up the way they're meant to be. You're going to make sure everything's nice and straight, like that. You can even iron it from the top, like this. Just go across. So you can iron the waterproof canvas that I sell, which is why I don't hold it on there too long. But I do iron it all the time. So there we go. Card slot's done. Now we're ready for sewing. So I'm starting with my flaps. Now I've got the interior and exterior the same, but you want to make sure that you put your stabilizer on the interior flap. Now the way I've written this pattern, you can actually have the flap go either way. So I've obviously got mine going up like this with the curve on the left, but you can quite easily have the curve on the right because of the way that I've placed the magnet. But always put your stabilizer on the interior piece because this is where we're going to put our magnet, so it's going to help it be stable, hence the stabilizer. So we're going to take our accent pieces and we're going to take some double-sided tape. Now you obviously don't have to do double-sided tape, but I do find it much, much easier for it to stay in place. Now I'm going to put two pieces. So I put one at the straight, and then I'm going to put one on an angle. Now I'm trying to keep the sticky tape out, or double-sided tape, out of the stitching area. I'm just putting it in the middle as like a tacking system. You could also, instead of using this, you could use clips. So just wonder clip it to the outside accent. But ultimately I do find this much, much quicker. So that's why I do it this way. So you just want to peel off the backing of your double-sided tape. Like so. Whoops, just knocked my light. And then we're going to grab this and just place it on the top. Now, if you've cut everything correctly, it should all just line up lovely, like that. So I'm going to do both so that I can chain stitch, because I do love chain stitching. I've also fixed the tension issues that I was having where my thread kept disappearing. When I put my machine back together, one of the parts, I knocked it out a little bit, like 1 mil too far. So I actually took off this cover so that I could see what was going on. It's actually quite fun to look in there. We should do that one day. But I had to just knock the tension wheel in like 1 mil so that it would touch the thing, and then everything's happy again. So I've got my stitch length on 4. I've got my tails behind me. You are meant to hold your tails when you're stitching, which I never do. But let's do that now if I could pick them up. So I'm going to stitch the inside edge first, because that's the one we're going to look at. So we're going to go 2 stitches, and then I'm going to lift it up, and I'm going to lift my foot and just pull it back and go back through that first stitch. You want to try and go right back through the hole so you're not creating new holes. And I'm stitching 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And then I'm also going to do the outside edge. We will eventually chop these stitches off, but until we do, this holds everything for stitching. So I'm using this hand to make sure that all my vinyl is flat. I actually recently made one of these with the Zephyr vinyl from Spotlight, and it's stretched, and I really was not happy with it. I bought some Zephyr vinyl just to see if I liked it yet. I do not. I will be sticking to my standard Pacifica. And for those that are on Facebook and in Australia, I'm going to start slowly getting in colours, which will always be released on Sunday at 4 p.m. And the only reason I'm saying this in a video is because I know that there's a few people, I get emails where they don't have Facebook, and I wouldn't like it if you missed out. So, and I feel like that sentence didn't need its own video. Okay, so that is now stitched all the way around. I didn't care as much about these ones, so you can see it's not perfect over here. That doesn't matter. As long as it's within the seam allowance, we are good. So we are going to take our exterior and the lining piece. Now, because I'm using waterproof lining, there's no interfacing on the back, but I have made one. Well, actually, you saw it at the start of this video because I haven't recorded that yet. But I've made one with just waterproof canvas just because I wanted to see, and it worked out lovely, actually. So, see how now I could technically do either piece. This is how I've designed the wallet. So if you'd like the curve the other way. But the way that I know is because I put the stabilizer on the lining one. So I don't have to think too much. And I like that I don't have to think while I'm sewing. It's more relaxing. So we're going to line this up and we're going to stitch this down. So we're going to stitch, we're going to back stitch. We're going to grab the other one and then we're going to chain stitch so that we waste less thread and time. And then we're going to grab this first one, snip it off, snip off the tail. I think my snips are getting blunt. And so I'm going to fold this over, and I want my seam allowance to be on the same side as the exterior, and then we're going to top stitch it down there. So I'm going to crank it back up to 4 because I want all my top stitching to look fabulous. But you can just stitch it in a 2, like a size 2.5 stitch length, sorry. And then we're going to back stitch to lock it in. And then we're going to grab this one and we're going to do the same thing. So we want this to fold over here, and then we're going to stitch on the lining side. Like that. It has just occurred to me I have not grabbed any of my hardware, but that's okay. We can do that in a minute. Let's move on to the card slots. So now that I've got this, I want a top stitch. Now this is completely optional. You can just leave them as they sit, but I'm not going to. So I'm going to fold down that top bit, and we're going to stitch, stitch, and off we go. And then we're just going to do a little back stitch. Now, to chain stitch these, I wasn't going to show this, but you get the idea. You'd cut this off and start again. But to chain stitch it, you can actually pull this over and maneuver it so it goes under the needle, like so. I'm going to stitch, back stitch, top stitch, pull this over. Now it gets a little bit tricky, so you may not want to do it this way, but I very much do. And it's going to look really, really weird. It actually looks quite messy, but that was much quicker than stopping and starting and stopping and starting. And now if you just come and clip in between all the pieces, everything falls back into place. Now you don't have to do it that way, but I just thought I'd show you that way in case you wanted to. See, now they're all stitched. So before we go attaching anything else, we want to make a little ID window. Now again, this is an optional thing. You don't have to have this if you don't want to, but I do. So I'm going to have the vinyl face down and put the clear vinyl over the top so that I can see what's going on. And then I'm going to put some clips on it. But I'm going to make them face so the colored bit is facing down so that when I stitch it, I can see what's going on. Like that. So now I'm going to stitch the inside edge first. I'm going to grab onto these. Now, I am not going to do a back stitch here because I want it to look really, really neat. So I'm going to come 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and I'm just going to stitch around because I'm going to pull the threads through and tie them at the back, which is why I held on to them to make sure that they wouldn't go anywhere. Needle down, pivot. So now I'm going to hold these 2 threads, come up to them so that they all look lovely and even, and then I'm just going to grab these and do a big circle until I can pull them through. Like, oh no, I missed one. I want this side. Now what I've actually done there is I've pulled one too many stitches out, but I can fix that with a needle. That's what I get for pulling too quickly. So I'm just going to put one of these I want this one here. So I'm just going to put a needle on it and do that single stitch. So I'm going to go up through this hole right there. This was a really good problem exercising. I've never shown you how I fix this. Up through there and then down to hide that join. See? And now it's gone. And you can't tell that I manually hand stitched that because I went through the same holes that already exist. So now I just want to take some tails and double knot them. So I'm just going to take 2 and 2 like that, and then grab these 2 and do a double knot. 1 and 2 like that. Trim off this excess like so, and voila. So now I'm going to top stitch one of the edges. Now I'm going to back stitch this because you won't see the stitches as long as you just do a few. No, lost that. Oh, that did like its own little knot. That was weird. Yeah. Because the light's here, I can't see where the needle is. But I have been informed that the other light that I have here is too bright and creates weird lines in my videos. So I'm sewing with this light instead. Alright, so now I've top stitched it like this. I want to place it. I want to place the raw edge of the vinyl along the top edge of the stitching of this one. Now, if you do it down a little bit, it's not the end of the world. That's okay. But here's where the problem solving comes in. You can either stitch all the way up now, or you can just pull this one out and just stitch the one. The problem with that is this part. So the easiest way to make sure everything's going to line up is we're going to line it up. And then you want to stitch from bottom to top. Now, I still haven't trimmed this down to the actual size it needs to be yet. I will get to that. There, 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 and there. So I'm just stitching really close to the edge so that we're not going to see it. Like that. So now it won't shift. So now I can cut it down to the size I actually need, which is to there. Get some big scissors to do that, I think. Trim off these tails. Okay, so now everything's the size that I need. We're going to grab this and we're going to line it up, and then we're going to make sure that the side where we stitch is facing upwards. And we're going to stitch down each side like that. This is all just tacking stitches. So now this is one piece. Trim off all the tails, and there should be a little bit hanging out the bottom. This is my attempt to keep as much thickness out of the bottom as possible. Now these, I'm looking at this, it's actually a little bit crooked. See how it's veering off? That is my fault. So to fix it, I just need to see where it's going wrong. So as of this one here, this one, so off from the back, you can see where it went crooked. So I'm just going to unstitch my tacking stitch to make it straighter. This is what happens when you sew too early in the morning. I'd say I'm embarrassed because it's my pattern, but I'm really not. It's very early. Such is life. I'm just going to unclip that bit as well, like that. There we go. So now, if I realign that, see, I can straighten it. Just need to pull that little bit there down and then tack it back the way I want it. And voila, crisis averted. There is a solution for every problem, people. Even if it is insanely early. All right, so now we're going to take our card slot back piece, which is also going to be the side accents. So it is meant to be bigger, people. Don't freak out that it's a different size. I promise it's meant to be. So again, I'm just going to, so this, putting this on is going to hide all of that stitching that I just did. All of the stitching up until now was all just tacking stitches. So, from bottom to top, we're going to stitch, we're going to back stitch, we're going to stitch up the side, we're going to back stitch, we're going to pull it out, trim off those tails, see, got my sticker back, people. Alright, then we're going to bend this over so that there's like a big gap, and then we're going to do the same thing. So we need to stitch this edge. Stitch, back stitch, up we go. Excellent. Trim off the tails. Now the tricky bit. I have accidentally put on the hefty interfacing under this, so this is going to be a little bit tricky to turn, but we're just going to push in one of the edges. Just keep folding it in on itself so it implodes and eventually goes through. And then you can always pull this one in the opposite direction to turn it out. You can turn it in or out, it actually doesn't matter. But if you do both, about halfway you should get something to grab onto and pull the rest through. That's the idea anyway. This is only being so tricky because I used the wrong interfacing. So don't use anything too thick here. But unfortunately I am out of the fabric. So I couldn't have just cut another piece. It will work, it's just a little bit more work to do it. Just got to get a good grip on this bit, and then that bit, and then pull. See? And then, wham bam, thank you ma'am. So then when this sits straight, you're going to have a little bit of the accent on each side. Like so. So now we just need to do the top stitching, but only on the the right side, sorry. Nope, I just ran out of bobbin thread. Excuse me. So I have unpicked the stitching that I had, and then I went and just gave it a really, really good iron because it was all looking a bit kind of wonky. So it's looking much nicer now. So now I'm going to top stitch the right side. So we're going to stitch, back stitch, then we're going to set that piece aside. So that one's done. Now we can move on to our slip pocket. So the way I do this is I'm going to fold it in half. Now you can iron it if you want to. And then I'm also going to take one of my zipper pockets. So I've got two and I've ironed them in half with the right sides touching so that I can measure 1/2 inch down and then 3/4 of an inch in from each side. Now the reason that this pocket is smaller is because I didn't want there to be too much bulk in the edges, so that's why this one is smaller than that one. And same with the back. But this is the wallet that I use every day. I mean, I use the prototype one where the magnet's in the wrong spot, but it still works quite well. I find I use the outside zipper pocket more than the interior one. But anyway, right, so we've folded it over. We're then going to fold it this way and we're going to find the center. You can measure it. I'm just going to clip it and I'm going to do the same to this on the side I just drew on. It's important you do it this side, not the other side, or this isn't a pointless exercise. So I'm just going to clip it and find the center. So now to line this up directly in the middle of everywhere, I just line this raw edge up with the one that I've just clipped, like that, and that is where the pocket is going to sit. So you want to line up these bottom edges and you want it in the center. So we're going to start, I'm going to start in a corner, but you can start wherever you want, and we're going to stitch all the way around the zipper box. And then down, needle down, pivot. I've got to manually crank like 1/2 a stitch to get right into that corner. And then back stitch to lock it in. Trim these tails like so. Then I'm going to get some scissors and I'm going to fold this in half so that I can snip the center of the box, and it doesn't have to be perfectly in the center. You just don't want to do it right at the edge. And then we're going to trim down, and I'm going to get about 1/2 inch from the corners, and I'm going to triangle it out. Some people go all the way up to a 1 inch. That is your right. You do it however you like. I just eyeball it. I don't draw it on. I feel an extra pressure to follow the line exactly if I draw it on. Now, this stuff is awesome. You can actually just crease it, and it works the same as ironing it. So I'm going to crease both those sides up and then push it through the hole. Then I'm going to use my thumbs to push out those sides so that I get a nice crisp side. And look at that. Because I'm using the waterproof canvas, there is no need to iron. Love it. So we need some zipper tape. I'll be using the light blue. I could also use a bold blue or a turquoise like the thread or whatever. And I am going to need 2 of these. So I may as well cut them now while I've got my zipper cutting scissors out and about. And because I like to keep things neat, I will actually put that back away now. So I'm just going to take a lighter and slightly singe off those edges just so that they don't fray. Like that. And then we're going to put our zipper pulls on. So I'm just going to split it a little bit and then put one side half in and the other side. And I always look down into it to do this so that I can make sure that they're even, and then put the zipper pull on. This does take some practice, so don't be disheartened if you can't do zipper pulls like the very first try. It took me a while. I used to be really, really bad. It used to take me 5 minutes to put one on because nobody taught me that you have to try and level them up halfway in the zipper. So like that, and then I put my finger against the back and pull both sides down. It's got less chance of coming off then. So there we go, 2 zippers on. So we're just going to take this one. Now I like, with this, because you got to remember how we're folding it. So we're folding it this way. I like my zipper to finish at the top. But you can put it anywhere you like. It is yours to do with as you please. I put mine to the top though. So we're going to pull this behind and we're going to stitch all the way around that zipper box. So I'm going to, before I get too close, put the zipper towards me so that I can grab it easier. Then when I get close to it, I'm going to put my needle down, lift up my foot and zip it open so that the zipper doesn't distort my stitching. Cross the end, back up the other way. So again, when I get close to the zipper, I'm going to lift up my foot and zip it out of the way. And then pull it out and trim off the tails. If you need to, singe the tails a little bit. Okay, so now we need to fold over the zipper pocket so it's in half, and we're going to just stitch the 2 sides. Making sure that we backstitch at both ends. This is where making 2 at a time is really handy because you can chain stitch all of this. Stitch, backstitch, down. You're going to make sure that you don't catch the top. Unless you want that decorative stitching. I mean, you could, if you want to, stitch down there to be pretty, but I don't. I'm also going to top stitch this. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. It's just what, if I feel like having that extra little detail, I will stitch this in half. But I have made a few where I don't do that because I don't want the stitching there. Okay, so now, if you're worried, you can tack the bottom. So we're just going to tack it or baste it within the seam allowance. Like that. And then we're going to take our lining set and place this. So the idea is it will match up here, 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 and you'll just have these little corners that we have to cut off. And I decided when I was writing the pattern that this is quicker than trying to pre-cut those corners because you can just use a rotary cutter to cut out all of these shapes. So I'm just going to add some clips and then I'm going to stitch all the way around from the top side because I'm fairly confident that when I do the final join of this that my corners aren't going to move. So I'm stitching straight. Like that. And then I can just flip it over and trim off these little corners. Like so. And voila. So that is now on. So I'm going to face it right sides up. I'm going to grab my ruler and line it up there. And then I'm going to take my card slot panel and I'm going to put that up against the ruler. Now, some people have put a little piece of elastic in here to hold a pen, which I thought was very cute. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. I'm going to mark it for the purposes of this video, but usually I just stick the ruler here, clip it down, and stitch it. But this is erasable. So I've marked the line that I need. I'm also about to install the magnets because I went and got my hardware while I was doing a bobbin. So give me a second. So I'm going to line up the edge I need to stitch along there, and I'm going to start here and baste the bottom across like that. Then I'm going to pivot, move my clips out of the way, and I'm going to stitch along here so that this is up against the line, like so. And then I'm going to baste the top edge, like so. And so that is now on. Now we just need to install our magnet. So I'm going to grab my ruler and a marking utensil. This one doesn't have to be erasable if you don't need. And I'm going to mark, this is actually halfway. So if you wanted to, you could fold it in half and find halfway, but this was just as effective. And then I'm going to take one of my gaskets and put it over there. Now, if all's gone to plan, I am actually doing this on the stabilizer. So I don't need to add any extra stabilizer to the back of my magnet. So now I'm going to use my craft knife, and this one's nearly blunt, so I think it's nearly time to upgrade the blade. It'll cut through the vinyl fine, but if I was using, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but the very tip is actually now blunt. It used to be pointier than that, so to cut through fabric, not vinyl, but fabric, it's going to most likely ladder your fabric. So now would be the time that I need to change that blade to a fresh one. Now I'm going to take the male and put it on the flat piece. So the male is the flatter, skinnier one that pokes outwards, hence male. And I always like to put the thicker female body on the main part. So since the flap is not the main part, that's why it doesn't go here. I mean, if you accidentally do it the other way, it's probably not the end of the world, but that's where I like to do it. And so that piece is now done. So we can pop that aside. And we are now on to the back part of the body. So while we're here, I'm going to find the center. And you can even just clip it like that. And then I need to measure up to where the magnet needs to go. Like that. So I do a little right angle. And that'll show me exactly where the center is. It's like half the crosshairs. I could draw the rest, but there's not really much point. And so now I've marked the lines with the gasket. I'm going to cut them out like that. Now I'm finished with the knife, finished with the pen. It's always good to tidy as you go. You'll find if you tidy as you go, there's not a big mess to do at the end. So it's more or less time between projects because you don't have to stop and reset. Okay, female is now in. So now we want to take our zipper pocket, and the side that we didn't draw on is going to go face up. And then we're just going to hopefully line this up right where I need it. Now the easiest way for me to do this would be to use alligator clips because I think they reach the side. So I can do this, line that up to there, line that up to there, and these should just reach the tip. And while that's not a lot of holding, it's enough. Oh, I think my child just woke up. So you want it in the center and evenly down. And that looks pretty even to me. You can even measure it from the top, make sure it is. I'm pretty happy with that. This end might have to go up like a smidgen. Perfect. Okay, so now that that's lined up, the clips are holding it in place. So now I can stitch around the box. And I'm going to leave the clips on so that nothing moves. Back stitch when you get to the end. Now, before you cut it, take your clips off and check to make sure that it's even. Because if it's crooked, now's the time to fix it. If you cut that center, you can't uncut it. So that's the end of that. So you just want to pull this down and then make sure that nothing shifted. Now, I'm confident it didn't, but I did make one the other day where I didn't check properly and the box was crooked. So I had to take off this whole piece, scrap it, and make another bit. Scissors. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to fold it like this and then clip the center of that box. And then we're going to clip out towards the end and then triangle out those corners. And then we're going to do the other way. There and there. And then again, we're going to push this through. So I'm going to crease that side. Then I'm going to really crease this side and then push both the pieces through the hole. Now this one's going to be a little bit more stubborn. It won't be as compliant as the other one because of the vinyl. But it's not impossible. You can still finger crease vinyl and sometimes it loves you enough. See, that's not so bad. So now I'm going to take my zipper and I want it to close to the left. So I'm going to place it on the table the way I want it to close. And then I'm just going to place this pocket over the top like that. And then we're going to start stitching. Just need to tug on that lining so it's going to sit nicely. Nicely is what we want. I'm going to stitch down. We're going to pivot. We're going to move the zipper pull out of the way so that we don't accidentally stitch it. And then when we get close to where the zipper is, we're going to unzip it all. Needle down, pivot, up, pivot, down, needle down, zip it up, and back stitch when we get back to the start. Now again, if you don't want to back stitch, you can pull the threads through the back and then tie them off. So now we're going to do that same thing, but we're going to stitch the two sides and not the bottom. So we're going to leave this open because this will be the last stitch that we do is the bottom of this pocket. Because we're going to sew most of the way around this and then pull that last bottom bit through here so that it's smooth all the way around. Okay, so I've got the bottom open. So now it's time for final construction. So we're going to take these pieces and put them right sides together. I'm going to grab a bunch of clips from Scully, or Dark Scully. And we're going to just go around the edge. So I'm starting with the flap because I want this edge to match up perfectly. So I'm going to put one clip each side. I'm going to come and I'm going to do the same here. So the lining should match up perfectly. Like that. Then we're going to come to the bottom corners and do them. I mean, you can clip all the way around if you want to, but this is just how I do it. I want that there. And then just add some down the side for good measure. Like this, to make sure nothing shifts while we're stitching. Okay, so we're going to start here. We're going to go all the way around and finish at this other clip. So we're going to leave this bottom bit open. So the bigger the hole, the easier the turning, but we still do need to shut that later. So you don't want to have a curve to sew. So we always like to start on the end of the straight. Now I'm stitching this with about a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, which to me equals slightly more than 1/4. That's how my brain does that. I'm also sewing with the magnet side up. I know it's well and truly out of the way, but it's also just peace of mind, because I don't want to accidentally stitch that. That won't work out well for me. I'm going to back stitch there. So now that we've done all of that, we're going to take our scissors and I'm just going to trim all of the seam allowance. Now the reason I'm showing you this is because if you trim all of this excess off, your domestic machine is more likely to be able to do the final top stitch, because there is quite a lot of bulk, especially on this flap, and you want to have good looking stitches. And you also want your corners to turn out nicely. So I have just trimmed all of that down. I've made sure I've got especially close where the flap meets the body, because that's the thick part. And I went relatively close to the edges because I wanted them to turn. So if you've got zigzag scissors or pinking shears, they would be really good to use in this situation. So I'm going to start with the corner. I'm going to push it in. Now this is going to be quite stiff because it's got 2 layers of vinyl, and there's some stabilizer over there, and the fabric, and the stabilizer on the fabric. There's just a lot going on. So I always like to start with that corner because it's the furthermost point away, and then the rest just kind of folds through. Also, if you're worried about the top stitching, I deliberately made one with all fabric for the outer and then just have the vinyl accents. It does still look cool. I quite like it, but each to their own, I guess. Okay, so now that I've got it most of the way turned out, I'm going to take my pokey stick so that I get nice, crisp upper corners. So I'm mainly focusing on the flap right now. I want that to sit really nicely. And see, because of my clips, that edge lines up really nicely. But you can also see there's a little bit of a bulk there. So that's where these come in really handy if you're on a domestic machine. They're flat on here so that they don't like put teeth marks in your item. Okay, so I'm not going to turn out these corners, and you might be wondering why, and I'm going to show you why. We now need to pull this end back up through here. So there's no point in turning out the corners because I would literally just now pull them back again. So I don't want to pull it all out. I just want the edge part I need to sew. So like that. Now it's not going to sit terribly straight. So if you're new to sewing, start at one end and clip everything so that it all joins up. I tend to not clip this because I don't need to, but this is a teaching video and this is what I'm doing. So we're going to stitch, we're going to back stitch. We're going to go along this edge we're going to back stitch at the other edge. And then, just like the rest of the wallet, we are going to trim down this excess to make it more manageable to do top stitching. Because that was the main feedback I got from my pattern testers, that the top stitching was a bit tricky. So now I can push that back through. And now I will take my pokey stick and poke out those corners and that flat edge. So because I trimmed down that edge, everything should actually sit quite lovely. Now this goes the other side. Just wondering where my vinyl got to. So you can even just pop that in there to push those out. So now we want to just take this pocket and we're going to close it up. So I'm just going to tuck in from the two seams. I tuck over the edge and then pull tight. And then I can just finger crease this. If you use fabric though, grab some clips, clip along. You get the idea. You know what, clips actually might be handy right now. This one's being a bit stubborn. And so then we're just going to stitch 1/8 of an inch from the edge. So you want to get really, really close to the edge without coming off. And back stitch. Like that. Okay. So now we're going to top stitch. So I'm going to start down here. You can start wherever. I'm going to start here off to the side. I'm going to put my stitch length up to 4. I'm going to stitch 1 single stitch, back stitch. And now I'm just going to roll this as I'm stitching. Because I've cut out most of the bulk, this is actually stitching quite easily. If you're struggling with top stitching, do a full 1/4 inch because you're less likely to get all that bulky excess. And try and get them smooth curves if you can. So now that I'm up to this thicker bit, I'm just going to take my pliers and squish it, just because I have them. And because there's a lot of bulk. I'm just rolling this in my fingers to make sure I'm right on the edge. I'm going to get back to the start. I'm going to do a single stitch, back stitch, and then trim that off. And so that is now your wallet done. Now this is meant to sit just a little bit bigger because it's empty. When it's full, that will actually sit flush. So there you go. That is the strumpet. All right, guys. Till next time. Bye-bye.